oh, by the way, paying out of pocket is now cheaper than insurance. But get an idea of like how much does this cost? The doctor said they want me to get an echo. What is an echo and how much does it cost? Where can I find it? So we're adding features to help you also navigate the healthcare system. And then with that, the diagnostics, if you just take the basic, the diagnostics are a la carte. So you're like, hey, I like to get a bundle and say you get, your CMP, your metabolic panel, your lipid panel, and say, for instance, your LDLs are a bit high. You can come back in 6 months and go get your own lipids, go get a 10-minute draw, get your results within 48 hours.
Medicine promises answers, but too often it delivers confusion, fragmented data, repeated tests, and hidden barriers that keep people from clarity. Brent Dial has spent his career inside this contradiction, seeing firsthand how healthcare's complexity can fail the very people it's meant to serve. In this episode of The DNA of Things, Brent pulls back the curtain. As a finance leader turned healthcare innovator, he exposes what lies beneath the surface, the inefficiencies, the misaligned incentives, and the opportunities we're not seizing. But he also reveals a path forward, one where systems are simplified, patients are empowered, and data becomes not noise, but wisdom. This isn't just a conversation about diagnostics. It's about decoding the hidden architecture of healthcare and daring to imagine what happens when we finally see it clearly. As the founder of Beek Health, Brent Dial is an entrepreneur and disruptor working at the intersection of human behavior, technology, and biology with vast experience across emerging consumer tech and brands. He's developed a reputation for bridging social insights with practical systems for change. His approach reflects a commitment to both precision and humanity, translating complexity into clarity while never losing sight of people and communities. Through his leadership, Brent has challenged traditional business models and promoted regenerative thinking that values evolving human needs. His journey reflects resilience, curiosity, and a belief in connection as a driver of innovation. As a guest on the DNA of Things here today, Brent exemplifies the podcast mission, that is to explore how biology, innovation, and storytelling come together to shape a more conscious future. So his conversation here today invites listeners not only to understand systemic forces shaping health and business, but also to activate their own role in this transformation. So Brent Dial, it is my absolute pleasure to have you here today on the DNA of Things.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
All right. So let's start at the beginning, shall we? You are on to this, just fascinating journey insofar as making the unseen seen to folks. And one of the things we were, chatting about just ahead of this conversation, was the fact that, you're a silent carrier of all these biomarkers that if we adjust the rudder of a ship at a critical moment, 10, 20 years beforehand, that could be 20, 30, 40, 50 years of health span in the future. So I'd love to know, yes, we want to get into how Beek Health came to be, but, tell me a little bit about your journey and how did this become a problem that you felt you needed to tackle?
Yeah. So, like I said, happy to be here. I'll give short, preamble, but I was always, I went to college. I wanted to be an engineer. I went to the military academy. I always wanted to do things of substance and have impact. And so that carried me through, a long, windy journey. I was more interested in things that are cool projects that'll have some kind of impact. At one of the pivotal early stage points of my career after I was an investment banker is I was a CFO of a division at Anheuser-Busch, which essentially was starting on the other end, which is a vice, right? Selling alcohol. But what was interesting there is I was a CFO of the craft division. And, the challenge that sold me was everyone knows Budweiser and Bud Light. This is craft. What does the world look like when everyone understands craft beer, right? And so that challenge of having a new way of thinking about, alcohol consumption, sociability, and bringing that to the fore. So, that was one of the pivotal, interesting questions and experiences I had, sitting in New York at the headquarters thinking, what's the world like when everyone knows what IPA is? I go home that day, my dad drinks Heineken, right? And I ask him, he says, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm selling IPA. He's like, what's that? He's been drinking beer for 30 years. And so how do you get that behavior change? How do you see a new way of thinking about things? It's kind of always kind of grabbed me. And so obviously I think it's a key interest that you have to have when you're thinking about technology, because ultimately you have to have a pretty clear vision of what the world looks like when that technology is mass adopted. So you fast forward to a number of other experiences with startups bringing new things forward, new products forward. And most recently, I was the CFO of a company called Personal Genome Diagnostics, based in Baltimore, started by two well-regarded oncologists out of Johns Hopkins. And what they were doing was they developed a test, next generation sequencing, using tools like Illumina sequencers, bioinformatics, to get a better guide on what mutations were driving cancer tumors specifically in that individual. You're starting with a world where there's this funny word called histology, right? So the standard of care is you never understood, is like an oncologist and the pathologists are looking at your cells and they're like, oh, the color, the shape, the size, all these metrics of the cells to characterize them. And then, even by organ, where was it found, right? When actually at the end of the day, it's been about 500 genes that are associated with cell growth or the lack of cell death. And that's what cancer is at the root of it. And so understanding that genetic mutation gives you much more insight, regardless of where you find it in the body, of how to approach it. And it's just a new way of thinking about cancer. So that was really exciting, to understanding not only what new types of tools and insights were coming in healthcare, but also some of the challenges of getting that adopted. There's a statistic that it takes 17 years for an advance in healthcare to reach clinical delivery. And so here we are at that point. This is 2021. We were still quoting only about 20% of cancer patients get a diagnostic, a molecular test. And, we're sitting there talking about reimbursement back and forth. We're talking about oncologist uptake. We're talking about, okay, but it's not just the oncologist, it's geneticists, it's the pathologist, the tumor board. It's like, oy vey, right? I'm like, if I had cancer, I'd pay $2,000 and I'd like to understand. Oh, well, we only would reimburse it if we know what the mutation is. I was like, that's not a diagnostic. That's a confirmatory test, right? Like, why is this taking so long? And obviously I think the really galling thing is these are conversations being had out of the purview of the patient. The patient has no idea this stuff exists, have no idea that if they have that molecular test, they can go find a doctor to help them interpret it and do something with it, right? But they're not even being told about it. And so, that started at oncology, and, you started looking at cancer as the number 2 leading cause of death. What's number 1? Oh, it's heart disease. Okay. What's the cool test for heart disease? Oh, it's LDLs. It's lipo A. It's ApoB. Okay, that must be really expensive. No, it's not. They're commodities. Again, not within the purview of individuals, and so not much usage, not much uptake, and yet a very powerful tools. And so that kind of thought, by even some individual health issues, found out I had hypertension, high LDLs, high ApoB, low EGFR, pre-diabetic, and I'm like a reasonably educated 41-year-old at the time. So I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. And I'm paying for insurance, right? And so I said, okay, this is a problem that needs to be solved. Obviously, there's a lot of investment and excitement around healthcare, but the thing that excites me is bringing these things to individuals, because at the end of the day, again, going back to my experience at Anheuser-Busch, and there's many examples in consumer, you talk about smoking, right? I grew up in an era where everyone smoked, right? This is the early 80s, right? And then all of a sudden it clicked, and you wouldn't be caught dead smoking, littering, right? I remember throwing a McDonald's, bag out of the window in 84, right? Now you would be caught dead doing it. So having some belief, despite, a lot of pushback, having some belief that, oh, individuals can understand this. They will take us. This is important. And so that's what we're focusing on Beek. We're starting with labs, but we'll expand to diagnostics and putting it in a tool that allows individuals to interrogate their own health. I think lastly, I'll say, if you start at 35, for 35 to 65, you're going to the doctor for 30 years, right? If you go every year, but that's 30 years. and you essentially show up at 65 not much smarter than you were at 35 about your health. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of opportunity. If we just took a biomarker a year, right? You'd be pretty well versed in what health is. And so, we think we have enough time, enough access, and there is enough interest. You see a phenomenal growth in interest in this space that individuals will be able to own their own health.
Mm. You know, we had a conversation about this before because we're both parents, right? We're both dads.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things we talked about was, like one of my personal goals is I'd like, my daughter to have PhD knowledge in her body by the time she's 12. And so really what I'm saying is, or at least like the insights from that kind of core understanding of her systems biology, right? And I like how you just frame it there in so far as, hey, it's 30 years with your position that goes by, and you can learn a lot in 30 years, and I think for some
Is that
folks
fine?
who are some folks who are, let's say, not exposed to this kind of information, may see it as daunting. But it is, like you say, it's like one biomarker at a time about you over time, and you can paint a pretty interesting picture of proaction, of being proactive. And I already get to pass on knowledge to my daughter about family history, but that was an additional layer of molecular biology, right? So I had the advantage of doing my PhD in molecular biology and being able to see the world through that lens. And now with the explosion of all this different technology, I think the knowledge translation and the mediums available for that knowledge translation, I think, make it, much more accessible and fun to learn. I'll take, for example, not to go too far off on a tangent here. There's an app, it's like a piano, an app to like learn how to play piano. And, I just sat down with that thing, and after like 20 minutes, I was feeling really good about my progress. Like I had all these like dopamine hits, and, like it was gamified, right? It wasn't
Right.
like, first of all, I didn't have a piano teacher. We couldn't afford that. But even if I did, it wasn't like, the piano teacher ready to hit my hands with the ruler because I didn't have the right, and then like not knowing how to read the music. So feeling dumb. And it's so, there's a lot of ways that you can fail at learning piano because there's such a barrier to it. But now I like get in front of this video game and I'm like playing, I'm not playing any like Beethoven classics or something. I was playing like Ain't No Sunshine When She's Gone, but I was really playing it. My daughter was at clapping, and it was like 20 minutes. And there's a version of that medium, I think, that is the message for molecular biology that, can be simplified at a very early age. And, I think about one of the things that you are challenged with, depending on, who is the first user of your product, because it is a proactive decision to use something like Beek. I think, like if you've made a decision, right, to affect some kind of change, whether that's proactivity or regain your health, like you did. Like you and I shared similar stories of getting off track, being 50 pounds overweight and pulling it back, because I had a good partner who told me the truth. That was part of it. And then the other side of it was like, oh yeah, no, like if I look at these markers, I can see a different version of the truth. So in the early, stages of Beek Health, what does that early customer look like? And, you being, a business mind and a market mind, I'm sure you're thinking, okay, well, I know this is going to change, but like, who are those early adopters that you're seeing today making use of Beek?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I'll pivot from your point about the piano. It's across the board an increase in user expectation, just expectations of citizens, right? Why don't we know? I mean, I went to the doctor, and it's uncomfortable. Hypertension and essential hypertension the cause is generally never found. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me, right? I have an expectation that they know more, right? That they understand the causes, the reasons, the substratification. So I think people are asking for this information. They don't feel comfortable not knowing as much about their body, something that's so essential. They know more about everything else in the world. And they tell them it's too complicated. You got to go to a doctor, right? folks are on DraftKings, doing 5-bet parlays, right? Like, people have a pretty big aperture for understanding things that they care about, and they just haven't had the tools to do it. So some of them, so I think that community kind of bifurcates into two. One, who just avoid the medical system, don't go to the doctor because it's ridiculous. I got to wait 3 months, and then I got an 8-minute visit, and they're going to tell me the same thing I could have looked up. And then there's folks who we're all going to age, right? And so you're going to have, you're going to be engaged with a doctor at some point, right? And so it's folks that are a little bit further along who are just, not satisfied with their care. And again, come back and say, I should be able to know more. I should be able to impact this more. But there's just a gap between a doctor's visit and being at home with no tools, right? You can start to see some of that before, even before LLMs came, where people were using Chat GPT, but before that, people were using quote unquote Dr. Google, right? And so it's just this expectation is like, I can get insight into every other facet of my life. And I would argue there's two facets that are super important and are still very opaque to the average citizen. And that's law and health. And I think the time is now that a lot of that basic information of, what's going to get me in trouble? What is it? Can you mock up this contract? Like these basic things that are very routine, that almost like for most, lawyers and doctors is like, watching paint dry, right? Now we can start to shift some of that to individuals and allow, professionals and experts to upskill and work on the things that are far more complicated.
And so how does it work, right? If I want to become like a user on the Beek Health platform. So I'm looking at, you got lab diagnostics, you've got like patient portal consolidation, you've got device integration on the roadmap. And I think you're tracking towards, specific outcomes, whether they be pre-diabetes, hypertension, cholesterol, obesity,
Yep.
preventative screening. So like, walk me through it. I'm going to become a Beek Health user.
Yeah. So there's two main. Yeah. So our pricing is very simple. We have a basic, quick start, and health runner. The basic is just platform access. The health runner and the quick start basically give you a prepaid or discounted lab, right? Those are people who are a little bit more knowledgeable, say, I know I'm going to get 2 lab draws a year. So you could just prepay for that, and it's much cheaper. The platform itself is really simple. Through our sign up, we show you how quickly and how easy it is to sync your medical records. So you log in your medical records, and it'll just check, connect it. And then you get, platform access. In the platform, all the information in your medical records will just now be unified. So when you go look at visits, you're looking at visits from everywhere you receive care. You're looking at prescriptions. You look at prescriptions for every patient portal that you have. You look at doctor's notes from those visits. You can see all of that in one place, because a lot of times they either construct a longitudinal record. Okay, I don't see that doctor anymore. I saw that doctor when I was 35. I now see a new doctor, but now I have that information that I never normally would go back to that patient portal. But my current doctors will often ask me questions that are, related to that information that comes prior. So now you have that information in one place. We're adding features all the time. So as you mentioned, we'll be adding device wearables information. But also, we also have a little, small feature we don't publicize much, but it's cost estimates. Going into this world where you're, want to have more control over your decision making, then you're gonna, probably pay out of pocket. Oh, by the way, paying out of pocket is now cheaper than insurance, right? But get an idea of like okay, how much does this cost? The doctor said they want me to get an echo. What is an echo, or how much does it cost? Where can I find it? So we're adding features to help you also navigate the healthcare system. And then with that, the diagnostics, if you just take the basic, the diagnostics are a la carte. So you're like, hey, I like to get a bundle, and say you get, your CMP, your metabolic panel, your lipid panel, and say, for instance, your LDLs are a bit high. You can come back in 6 months and go get your own lipids, go get a 10-minute draw, get your results within 48 hours. You're able to self-manage these routine biomarkers, the routine diagnostics into your health. And then analyze that within the context of your medical record, right? And so you can always go. One of the big issues of going outside and going to Google or ChatGPT is that it doesn't have context. So between that and going to your doctor, and even your doctor often doesn't have full context, right? They only got what they've seen and what you tell them. So now we have a platform where you actually have full context so that the generic becomes specific, right? The population becomes personalized, population insights become personalized insights. And that is really powerful, not only for preventive health, but as you go through your aging journey to maintain health span.
So you've got this longitudinal record. You've got new data coming in, insofar as these commodity biomarkers are concerned. And then, effectively each person is, they have their own LLM.
Mm-hmm.
And then I suppose like the next step is like the application of clinician specific LLMs, let's say, or expert practitioner LLMs. So it's kind of like this multimodal future, right? Where, you bring your own data and, because the truth is about this future of, chat bots and LLMs is you get access to all the data at your fingertips. Well, the tricky thing is how do you know how to ask the right question?
Mm-hmm.
So that I think there is a different kind of collaboration in the future, where that really does become the role of, well, I mean, I think you're always going to have the expert practitioners for, emergency, true, health, sick care, let's say.
Yeah.
And we're going to need them. Car accidents is anything that's like an
100%.
acute injury. But yeah, there certainly is this evolution of, proactive health, which to be fair to docs, it really never was their mandate. I don't think. Right.
I totally agree with you. To be fair with them,
Yeah.
that is not, it was never their mandate, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we could talk about the role of the AMA on their behalf, right?
Yeah,
In terms
right.
of scope, getting their hands around everything. Whereas, now they complain they can't, no one can do anything without a doctor, right? And they're like, this is like low value. Why can't the nurse do this? Why can't, well, look at the AMA. AMA, that nobody can touch it, right? Because the doctor's got to do it. So I think it's part of institutional, but to your point, the system, it started as sick care. Nobody went to the doctor. They went to the doctor when you needed a doctor, right? That's kind of how it started. And then, we tried to like expand that and just done it really clumsily. And the economics are at their breaking point at this point.
Yeah. We had a light in our car dashboard blow off the other day last week. And, we just had some engine work done and it was, repaired and good to go. And the same engine light came back on. We're like, oh no. And they were like, oh, that's probably just like an air filter or gasket loose. Actually, did you know that we have like this little drive-through scanner film? So I didn't know that the shop had that. You just basically drive through and they run like a digital diagnostic, right? So you're not actually booking an appointment to get the full work done. It's like there's a kind of a pre-scan, that you can do. And then if there is something more, it's like, okay, well, there is something more serious that needs a look. So okay, we need to book that. But the interesting thing that I think you're working on and individuals who are pursuing this proactive biomarker scan, it is that kind of pre-scan, right? It's like you have a scale and, you can check the scale, every day, and probably most people don't, but it does become more shocking when you check it every month. You know what I mean? And so it's like, what's the sweet spot in terms of all these different biomarkers? Like to weigh yourself every day, you're obsessed about it. It's silly. Like I fluctuate 10 pounds in a week. So I'm not really going nuts over my body weight. And I know why that's true now also. So, as it relates to your blood scan, so you mentioned a couple of, scans a year. Like, is that the vision? I mean, you talk about, okay, there's blood, you talk about epigenetics, you talk about the microbiome, DNA, you talk about this whole digital twin. So you have this vision for providing people their whole, digital twin effectively. And I would imagine there's some kind of like automatic shipping through Amazon for the at-home tests where, you've maybe built a strategy would be based on your historicals, and then you've got a roadmap going forward. So what does that, future look like over the next year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? Have you thought a little bit about that at all, Brent?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So one of the other things that I found interesting as we've been building Beek is that you'd be surprised how knowledgeable people who have rare diseases are about something very esoteric and how quickly they become experts in it.
Mhm.
And so the idea, it kept coming to us like, man, again, back to this, we do 5-game parlays in DraftKings, but we don't know what a biomarker is. Right? It's like, actually, our capacity is actually much more than now. Am I ever going to be a doctor? No, you have to go to med school because that knowledge is broad, right? And this symptom is you got to be able to catch everything because your job is to sit at the front door and say, doc, something's wrong with me. And they ask you a bunch of questions, like, I don't know. They got to figure it out from, zero. But when you have a baseline, everybody's got 2 or 3 things they got to focus on. That's that's all you got to focus on. I have hypertension. That's the thing I got to focus on. I don't have hormone issues. I don't have, I've nipped my prediabetes in the bud, so I don't have to worry about that. My thing, my ApoB is high, my lipids. That's what I need to focus on. I don't have to focus on much else, much everything else. My routines, my habits kind of take care of those. I don't have muscle. I'm not going to have musculoskeletal because I'm very active, right? But then I have a friend who's a BMI of 31 who has the blood pressure of a baby. Blood pressure is not his thing. He's got it. You can check on that once a year, but he may have another issue that he needs to focus on and monitor. So the idea is that as you start this, starting from first principles, like we talk about DNA, you're starting with what you got, right? And maybe by 25, you start to hone in on, okay, this is from whether it's, genetic, pre-existing, exposures that you tend to have. What do you need to focus on? And so if we open up the aperture, taking a step back, one of the awesome things we get to do is instead of being a physician who you come to me, I have to do something about it right now. So that's why if you think about what's weird about the guidelines are, oh, if this is the LDL level, you got to get on drugs. It's like, well, maybe that's only been for like 1 year, right? Like, or we assume that this has been persistent, but we don't ask, we don't check, we just assume, and then we got to do something about it. But what if you got 200 LDL when you're 35? You got time to get this down, to change your behavior and lifestyle. And so what you need to focus on becomes much more apparent and why you have this kind of baseline. So what I'm saying is you're going to have flexibility on what you need to monitor when, depending on your risk factors, which is already outlined in medical literature. Not everybody needs to get this particular scan or this test when, but it's more risk factor driven. That's what you'll need to focus on. But you have all these things in an organized routine that you're able to manage. And so, to your point, the world is not after 5 years. You're not checking everything all the time. And oh, by the way, that's also going to be balanced by the frictionless nature and the cost of keeping a broader aperture of checking. Right. So, whereas I don't need to check my sleep, I'm pretty good on sleep. I don't need to check my sleep score, but it's in my watch, so I get it anyway. I get it for free, right? And if something happens, I can revert back to it, but I'm not really looking at it because I'm not really worried about that. But Apple just got blood pressure into their watch. I'm actually looking at my blood pressure. I'm not looking at my heart rate. I'm not really looking at my HRV. I just want to worry about my blood pressure. So my point is that in practice, after you get a baseline, you start to narrow down what are the things that you actually need to focus on. And that's totally doable, particularly when you have a platform that's running Copilot for you.
It reminds me of a conversation I had with Nathan Price, Dr. Nathan Price. We talked about him last time we chatted. And, I was talking to him about this notion of like the decathlon strategy, right? So like, if you want to win the decathlon, you want to pick like 2 or 3 events to be like world-class at. Like you could compete on the individual stage, right? So, pick 3 and go after those and be, kind of average, on the other things, right? So basically the lesson is like, go with your strengths. And he's like, yeah, so with health, it's like the opposite. You got to go with your weakness and you got to focus on the weakness until it's not a thing, right? So, and everybody is, if you take your, top 10 chronic diseases, everybody's going to present in a slightly different risk. And so everybody's care plan is slightly different. And, I guess that moves us away from like the population health to the personal health, right? And so, and then I think when, this is like Lee Hood's, challenges the P, the participatory, right? Insofar as, personal, how does it go? Healthcare, the future of wellness is
preventive,
yeah,
preventive, personalized, predictive, and
There you go.
participatory.
There you go. Participatory, right? So you got to want to play, I guess. And I think if it's just so overwhelming and you don't know where to start, or it's so general and it's so broad, it's like, yeah, I'm hearing that all along. So like this really is interesting because it's like, hey, if you just do this one thing for a week, you'll feel better. You drink more water, go to bed an hour earlier. And so there is this kind of like habit stacking that I think you think about, naturally. And I really like this idea of like you said, okay, well, we actually do predictive spend, right? It's like, hey,
Yep.
if you just go and do the status quo, like you're going to be on these blood thinners, you're going to be on these stats for the rest of your life. Here's how much that's going to cost versus here's what a gym membership's going to cost, or here's what walking in the park with your family looks like. And, oh, by the way, there are those side effects and there's the enabling behavior that just taking a pill, kind of sets in, and here are all the other things that start to happen. So yeah, it's fun to think that it becomes this like, well, everybody gets their own personal like Iron Man Jarvis type of thing, right? Where it does what you said, you're running your co-pilot in parallel, but that's it. It becomes kind of like conversational, and it's like, truly, for
Decision
you.
making. It helps you
Yeah.
do decision making,
Right. Right. And ultimately you get to make the decision.
and
And you
you get to
say,
make the trade-offs and the decisions. I mean, there is a cost component to it, but I would even say, what's surprising is, these frameworks. I go around and talk to my physician advisors. I'm like, where is this? They're like, yeah, you're theoretically right. You're right, but like this is how it happens in practice, and some of the stuff is there. So when you think about polychronics, the doctor's doing the math of like, what's the limiting disease? That's what I'm focused on first. I mean, you
mm-hmm,
can't tell. I mean, I have folks who have cancer in my family. Like, yeah, this is a problem, but this is a bigger problem. This will kill them before that kills them. So we're not even doing anything on that one. We're worried about this one right now. And so if you extend that to, preventive, right? You're always pushing back on what is the limiting condition for my health span.
mm-hmm.
And it kind of flips like, okay, heart disease might be the first one. If I can push that along, then I need to start focusing on my kidneys because that's the next limiting, organ. And so you can now make these decisions really thoughtfully. And obviously there's a cost to it. It's like, okay, this may be the limiting one, but to address it, it's huge lifestyle changes, really expensive. And you'd be surprised. Again, one of the things that's been surprising is that most you would assume if you look at TV, everyone wants to live an extra hour, an extra day, no matter the cost.
Mm.
Man, I could tell from personal experience, numbering like half a dozen of where like people in my family are like, I'm good. You know, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be in pain. But you can live a couple more. Nope. I'm good. I'm having my life. That's their values speaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you think they're like, no, you don't. Again, you watch TV, they're like, oh, you may say that, but when it's really down to it, you're going to change your mind. And these folks have gone all the way to the end and say, you know what? That was how I wanted to live. I don't want to be poked or prodded or take pills forever or have, not be able to drink or do whatever they want to do. So this is an opportunity to actually bring your values into how you live your life. I mean, it's almost, opening up, personal freedom in a lot of ways. Not only freedom from kind of population health, where you might be the edge, and they're like, yeah, we accept that, folks on the edge are not going to do well. No, no, no. I like some say in that. I like a personalized view, or we're rationing the diagnostics because you don't fit the population level risk factors or criteria, and you're like, okay, but I like to pay for it because I would like to know. So we're opening that, but also when you have that information, some of the personal autonomy to bring your values. Like, okay, I understand what that's going to cost me for me. Listen, I think it's actually, instead of being a negative, maybe shortening life health span, I actually think it's going to extend health span, because while people may start with those values, if they now have a platform with what I like the, best three words in medicine, let's look together.
Mm.
And so they can see what the physician is telling them, and they can come back in 2 years. I'll tell you, when I first started this journey, pharmacotherapy for hypertension, I was like, no, no, I'm not doing it. Like, I'm going to take my time. And I went through 2 or 3 years. I wanted to see kind of what's my real risk profile. I went and got an echo. Say, okay, you telling me if I continue to have high, stage 2 blood pressure. It's going to impact. I'm not, necessarily just going to die of a stroke. My calcium score is 0. Like, what's my real risk? And I go get an echo and I'm like, okay, I'm starting to see some damage there. That's what I want to manage. Okay, yes, I'm ready to take antihypertensives. But these all were driven by me. No cardiologist, even at $500 an hour, wasn't recommending that I get a calcium score, wasn't recommending that I get an echo to satisfy my own knowledge about my own. And so if I didn't have access to that, I might have been continue to be stubborn until something happened. But that having some visibility allowed me to get comfortable and make it feel like I'm making this decision for my own life.
Do you like see the value in like kind of peer-to-peer learning or like a coaches, like health coach networks? I know, like, I think I saw Harvard has like a wellness health coach certification that they're building. Do you think like this is the kind of, tool that coaches, I mean, I love coaches. Like, coaches help me achieve everything I've ever achieved. I coach as a result, and it's just such a rewarding profession. And and this is something that I would speak to on the different folks that I would coach with, whether they be high performance athletes or entrepreneurs or like you dads. I tend to coach things that I've been through and struggled through. But yeah, like this biomarker unit is very much a part of it. So do you see like partnering with different coach networks?
Theoretically, yes, but I think a couple of things that are interesting to happen. One, the cost of coaching, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, cost of having any human do anything for you is just tough, right? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, everything is expensive. So I think there's an economic aspect to it. I mean, depending on the goals.
Right.
I do think there's a huge space of most of the stuff is pretty basic, right? Once you get into it. So you might work with a coach for a year, but then, you're talking about the same thing. You're like, so approach might help you get on track, but you're like, yes, we go over my LDLs, they're in track. And I know, like, and so there's also, kind of what happens after. I think the biggest lever is really just the mainstream. Back to what the first thing you mentioned is peer-to-peer. It being in the culture, right? Once it's in the culture, we're sitting at a bar with my buddy and he's like, I'm like, dude, yeah, man, I can't do that right now. I got to get my LDLs down. I've been, working on this. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I mean, you don't know what your LDL, you don't know what a good LDL is? Nah, man, I don't know. Like, he's 1 out of the 10 friend group and we're looking at him like he's a Luddite. Like, no, I go to the doctor for that. And you're like, you go to the doctor to check your LDL? Right? I mean, imagine your buddy, I told you, he goes to the doctor to check his weight. You'd be like, seriously? Right? And so, in my view of the world, there's, as Peter Thiel says, there's before and after. It's a discontinuity. It's a discontinuity when, your friends are talking about EGFR and, prediabetes numbers and LDLs and ApoB. That's a different world, right? Where a lot of and that gets you through probably to 50 with really good confidence. You're talking about the different medications, right? I mean, there's a ton of them. Which one are you on? How does that work for you? Why is that working for you? So, bringing healthcare into, I mean, one of the things I would love to see, my unpopular, my cultural pushback is when people die, we never talk about the reason, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many close friends, and I still don't know what happened. Did they have a heart attack? No, they died in their sleep. Well, it's such a secret, so sensitive, right? But I think there's much power to having that be a part of the conversation that we continually have with each other, right? And that's how you learn. When you get in the culture, it becomes free because it becomes habits. It becomes everyone kind of knows this. And we offload what we currently know, which is actually not that much, actually, I would argue. We offer, and it's commoditized. So let's offload what we currently know. And then there will be a space for the coaching. I would say, just like physicians will level up, coaches will level up. They may be, coaching you through some gene therapy, right? Or, something that's a little bit more complicated, a little bit more risky, right? But for a coach to coach you through LDLs just seems like that. If obviously we may be there now because people don't know anything or they're going to a doctor. So this is a good midway point. But ultimately, the things that can, start to guide your habits all the way through, call it 50, that should become a commodity, if you will.
Gotcha. Well, when I started the conversation, I promised I was going to ask you 3 questions, right? So number 1 was, who needs to hear it? Or so, number 1 is, what's the key takeaway here? And I can get a prediction of what it is. Number 2, who needs to hear it? And then number 3 is, who would you recommend as my next guest?
So what is the message? The message is you can do it. In terms of the long arc of technology, it's been to make things easier, faster, and much more, and increase the capabilities of individuals to do things. And again, the 2 things that have lagged behind are, I would say, legal and health. And so, with tools that we're building, we'll make this much more user friendly and expand the scope of human autonomy. And so you will be able to do it. You can understand this. Obviously, it's a little early where you have to kind of go find the information, or you kind of like do a little work to understand what some of these biomarkers are. But over time, there'll be common knowledge, right? And so that's what we're building. So you will be able to do this. So why not get started early? And it matters, and it's really impactful. The second part is, who needs to hear it? I would say everyone, but I think if you think about the market, you can look over the scope of, up until you're 35, call it 35 to 65. And then, after 65 are probably 3 good, discrete communities. We focus currently on kind of the middle. That's because if you eat 6 cheeseburgers at 20, your biomarkers probably didn't change, right? As they say, you're still in bubble wrap, right? Your metabolism is still in bubble wrap. You try that at 35, 40, you'll feel it, and your biomarkers will start to reflect, your aging. And if you go too far to the right of that, then, you're probably better off in sick care. While you definitely better to be a much more informed patient, then you're getting a lot of treatment. We don't treat, right? We're still preventive. And so, you're going to need a doctor, and, you'll just be a smarter patient, right? But they're not going to be, having a platform like this won't be, what is treating you. So yeah, we're starting with folks that we call, and the technical term we give it is subclinical, right? Something's happening. It's not bad enough to have a doctor deal with it, but you can arrest it. You can influence it, type of thing.
Subclinical. I like that. And
Yeah.
and who's the guest that you recommend?
The guest I recommend is Dr. Pearl, Dr. Robert Pearl. I think he's written a number of books. He has I think some of these physicians that really starting to usher in the new way of thinking. Dr. Pearl's a great one. Dr. Eric Topol, I'm sure you're familiar with, is a great one. We've leveraged, he along with Dr. Leroy Hood, Dr. Nathan Price, like we've really leveraged a lot of their insights and their vision. And so I think, continue to pry that door open as physicians are getting on board, and not so much in terms of longevity, right? I mean, longevity is, I think is, a difference without a distinction, right? But what I would say is, I think a lot of physicians are starting to point to this space that's not rapamycin and all these, novel interventions, but expanding again back to our core, focus, expanding the remit or the opportunities for individuals to influence their health, and starting with knowledge.
Amazing. All right, that's a big lineup that you've given me to chase down. I will do. Actually, spoiler alert, we have had Nathan Price before. We do have Lee Hood queued up, and so yeah, I'll definitely ping you when that episode goes live.
Yeah, I'd love to see that conversation. They've
Amazing.
been talking about Aravel and today, like have followed those guys pretty closely. Really, really impressed with them, and grateful for the contributions that they've made.
We stand on the shoulders of giants, isn't that the truth? Brent, thank you so much for taking the time today. I'm really excited to get this out and watch Beek's success and the ripple effect of providing individuals access to a proactive, empowered, biomarker informed life. Thank you so much for everything you're doing.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Now that the curtain has been lifted, we can't unsee what Brent has shown us. A system that buries answers beneath bureaucracy, but also a future where clarity is possible. The question is, what will you do with this vision? Will you accept the cracks as inevitable or join in reshaping how we think about health? The DNA of things exists for this very reason, to expose what's broken or opportunities to fix, and to amplify those daring enough to fix it, and to invite you into the work of building something better. As you leave this episode, I ask you to consider carrying Brent's message with you. Systems may be complex, but they are not immutable. The power here is to change them and to change what lies within us.